about digital equity and digital inclusion in libraries. We have a few minutes at the top of the call to talk about any initiatives or announcements that you all have going on at your libraries or in your context. We'd love to talk about that. Or if you just want to unmute to introduce yourself or type in the chat to introduce yourself, we can do that now. Love to hear from folks. Hey, Marika. Hello. Hey, Chelsea. Hey, Jacqueline. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hello.
We're giving people another minute to get logged in. Thanks for being here. Today we're going to be talking about the Digital Equity Act. We have Shirley and Catalina here from the World Education to share some resources and updates on the whole process and timeline. We also have Marika Visser here from the Maine State Library to talk about what's going on in Maine as it relates to the Digital Equity Act. But we're starting off with some announcements and updates. Emily and I have some updates from ALA, but we'd love to also hear from you all if there are things you're working on or just want to share with the group, or if you want to say hi. Feel free. We want to keep these meetings really open and informal and hear from everyone as we're able. So thanks for being here. Anybody have anything to share?
I'd like to address issue that people may be aware of. We have moved on from the tenure of the now former director of IMLS, Crosby Kemper, and are currently in a position where we are being led and directed by an acting director. That is Cindy Landrum from the Office of Library Services, who was formerly our deputy, and for the next several weeks, perhaps, or a month or two, whenever the White House gets us a new director, Cindy Landrum is the head of IMLS.
Thank you, James. Anybody else have an announcement or anything they want to share, something they're working on?
I will shamelessly plug my dear friends at the Columbus Metropolitan Library. I think I saw, yep, they're logged on here. I'll be presenting with them at PLA. We're going to have a session called Digital Inclusion in Action, talking about digital navigators. If you are at PLA, come find me. I look like this, but taller.
I almost was like, when are we going to do it today? But I forgot.
I cannot. I have payroll today.
Thanks, Flo. I have an announcement about PLA, so I'm glad you said that. And we can talk about that now. So yeah, I had flagged a couple of digital inclusion related sessions at PLA. I hope folks are going to PLA. Lo will be there. I will be there. Michelle will be there. Probably many of the rest of you will be there. Looking forward to it. We also have a broadband session called Broadband, Public Libraries, and Federal Funds to Move from Digital Equity Plans to Implementation at 11:30 on Thursday. Michelle is one of the speakers for that. I don't know if Michelle, if you want to say anything more about the session.
No, I do not. Yeah, no.
Okay.
I just hope everybody will be there.
Yeah, go to Michelle and ALA's session on Thursday at 11:30, and I believe the Digital Navigators one with NDIA and Columbus is right before that, right? It's on Thursday as well, 10:15. Great. So Thursday is a busy PLA day. Hope to see you all there, and nice. It would be nice to meet folks in person. Thank you for sharing that, Ray. The same time as PLA. Okay. Anybody else have updates or announcements or just want to say hi and introduce themselves today? nice to see so many folks here. Okay, well, we have a few ALA announcements and then we'll turn it over to our featured speakers today. Today's meeting is going to focus on the Digital Equity Act. We have Shirley and Catalina here from World Education to talk about some of the resources that World Education has created to support digital equity, the Digital Equity Act, and some of the timeline and processes and next steps and things that you can expect. And then we'll hear from Marika Visser from the Maine State Library about what they're thinking about in Maine. Yeah, so before we do that, Emily, I will turn it over to you for our first few announcements.
Sounds great. Thanks, Megan. So just want to put out a reminder to folks to keep an eye out on ALA's Digital Equity Resources page. We'll have some new resources coming soon, including one for the state Digital Equity Capacity Grant. And we update this page regularly with information, policy updates, and resources from ALA and other stakeholders in the field. So just a quick plug to keep updated on that and the forthcoming resource that will be coming out hopefully soon. ALA is co-hosting a webinar with ARSL, COSLA, and the Urban Libraries Council. So the webinar is titled Advancing Digital Equity Through Federal Programs and Library Partnerships. It will be held Monday, April 15th, 2025 at 1 p.m. Eastern. The webinar will feature a conversation between NTIA and public and state library leaders. We'll drop a registration link in the chat, but would love to see folks there. And then I will pass it back to Megan.
Thanks, Emily. So we talked about PLA. I hope to see folks next week. Definitely let me know if you'll be there. We'd love to see you. And then we're also going ahead and thinking about ALA Annual in San Diego this summer. We will plan to hold our June Digital Inclusion Working Group meeting in person at Annual. So if you are attending the conference, be on the lookout for that in the schedule. I don't think we have our time and date yet, but we would love to see you there, and we'll plan kind of a more informal agenda just for folks to connect face to face and talk about digital inclusion, digital equity issues. So stay tuned for that. Hotspots in E-rate, we hear that that should be coming out very soon, probably next month. So we are expecting that the FCC will issue the report on order on that, and maybe a supplemental window to a filing window so that libraries can go ahead and take advantage of hotspots and get that going. ALA will be providing more guidance on what that looks like and what the program rules look like. So we will keep you posted on that. But we are hoping that that will come out really soon. So for those that aren't familiar, hotspots, we have been advocating for hotspots to be eligible for E-rate funding. And so that would be a great opportunity for libraries to build upon programs that they started under ECF or another grant, or maybe you've been thinking about lending hotspots, or maybe you are lending hotspots, but you don't have sustainable funding yet, or you want to scale up what you're doing. All good reasons to look into the E-rate funding for that. And so we will keep you posted on that program and the guidelines, but should be coming soon. Chris, we hope not. So Marika and I and the ALA team have been having a lot of conversations with the folks at the FCC about the burdens and the trouble that libraries had with the ECF application process. So we have been asking for simplified rules, ways to minimize record keeping, and so that they can still get the data that they want without burdening libraries, especially small and rural libraries that most need this kind of program. So stay tuned, but we certainly hope not. That is definitely one of our goals. And then finally, many of you are participants in Shelby, the Schools, Health, Libraries, and Broadband Coalition, and they have their annual conference every fall in Arlington, Virginia. It's in October 2024. They've just opened their call for proposals, and if you're interested in submitting a digital inclusion session to that conference, those are due on April 11th. I posted the registration link in our Connect group yesterday. Or I'm sorry, the submission link in the Connect group yesterday. So if you're interested in attending Shelby and you want to present, if you're doing something cool, maybe something with hotspots, maybe something with the Digital Equity Act, take a look at that. Okay, anybody else have any follow-up questions, announcements, ideas? Okay, well, Shirley and Catalina, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. And before I start, I want to say that I see a couple of people on the attending today. So I'm very excited to see Wen here, and also Lou from the Free Library of Philadelphia. And I also see Lo from NDIA here. So another great source of information. My name is Catalina Gonzalez, and I'm going to be presenting today with my colleague, Shirley Doan. We have been both working together for the past 2 years on a project called Transforming Immigrant Digital Equity, and the project has allowed us to do a deep dive into the Digital Equity Act, provide technical assistance, and do advocacy around the unique opportunity that this provides to continue our work in digital inclusion and digital equity. Here is our agenda for today. Is going to be a flash presentation, and we are going to talk about the Digital Equity Act, some upcoming opportunities, and then next steps. We're going to be sharing the slides, and we're going to be sharing all the resources so you can dedicate your full attention to the content that we'll be sharing. So no worries about the resources that will be available to you. So let's start. So what is the Digital Equity Act, in case some of you may not be familiar with it? So while we don't have enough time to review all the ins and outs of the legislation, here is a very quick overview. The Digital Equity Act is part of the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed in late 2021, and is the most significant federal investment in digital equity that we have ever seen in the country, and it has established the 3 programs that you see on the screen. The state planning grant via formula funding to date. All the states have already sent their plans for review to NTIA. The state capacity grant and the competitive grant. So those are the 3 programs under the legislation. So as you can see in the timeline in the slide, all the states, as I mentioned earlier, have their relevant state digital equity plans. In some states, their plans are referred as digital opportunity or digital access plans, but regardless of the name, they are all part of this effort. The states are now waiting to apply for the next round of funding, which is the state capacity grant. The NOFO has not been released yet. So all the states are waiting. And once the states receive the capacity grants, the competitive grant program will begin. So that's where we are. There's lots of unknowns at the moment. So here are some key elements to be familiar with. Number 1 is digital inclusion. As defined by the federal government and in the context of the Digital Equity Act, includes the 6 elements that you see on the screen: available and affordable, reliable broadband, affordable internet-enabled devices, applications and online content for self-sufficiency, participation and collaboration, digital literacy training, quality technical support, and awareness of online privacy and cybersecurity. Another important term to be familiar with is covered populations. And so the Digital Equity Act prioritizes 8 groups of people called covered populations. These include incarcerated individuals, but not those that are in a federal facility, and then aging individuals, covered households, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with a language barrier, and here we include English language learners and individuals with low levels of literacy, members who are individuals who are members of a racial or ethnic minority group, and individuals who primary residence is in a rural area. I'm gonna pass it now to my colleague, Shirley.
Thanks. So we're going to take some time now to just go over the main points of each Digital Equity Act program and highlight opportunities for action. So on the next slide, please. So for the past year and a half, states have been using their state planning grant funds to develop a state digital equity plan. And like Catalina mentioned, some states may refer to their plans by other names, such as a digital opportunity plan, digital access plan, digital adoption plan, but all state plans still have to meet the same requirements, including the ones listed here for you. So that includes the barriers to digital equity, measurable objectives for these elements of digital inclusion, and how the state is going to collaborate with key stakeholders, which again is defined by the legislation. In each state plan, you'll also see an asset inventory of digital inclusion providers in the state, as well as a needs assessment for the different covered populations, and of course, the state's proposed implementation strategies to ensure digital equity for all. So, community anchor institutions, including libraries, schools, and hospitals, are listed as key stakeholders in the state plan. So there is an imperative for states to include all of you in their planning and implementation. And then, of course, that also includes any partnerships that you may have. So diving into the state capacity grant then, on the next slide, please. Thank you. So the state capacity grant will provide implementation funding for states to implement their finalized state digital equity plans. This funding, which will start later this year, will last for 5 years. It's formula funding. And during this implementation stage, states are likely, but not guaranteed, they're just likely to subgrant at least some of this funding out to providers, including libraries, for the digital inclusion activities that are written in the plan. Next slide. So currently, in advance of the capacity grant coming out, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, is reading and accepting state digital equity plans, and a bunch of states actually had their plans accepted just today. The application materials for the capacity grant were published back in mid-February. Those are available to the public. So we know that the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or the NOFO, is likely to come out soon. And then once the NOFO is out, states will have up to 60 days to apply for the capacity grant funding. And just as a point of clarification, since all of these plans are starting to be accepted, NTIA acceptance of a state digital equity plan does not mean that the state has applied or been approved for state capacity grant funds. Even so, a state has to have their plan approved, and they still have to apply for state capacity grant funds using the same application materials as everyone else. On the next slide, thank you. So while we're in this waiting period, what can you do now? So the first thing is to take some time out of your very, very busy schedule and actually sit down to read the state digital equity plan for your state. And if you haven't already, connect with the lead agency. So the link in this slide is going to take you to World Education's Digital Equity Act Tracker, where we've been collecting all of the state digital equity plan drafts and final versions, as well as contact information for each state lead on the Digital Equity Act. And that will have all of the information that you need in order to follow up with your lead agency, as well as things that you can look for as you're reading the state digital equity plan. So first of all, our libraries listed as key partners and in what capacity. I will say, out of all the plans that we've read so far, libraries are mentioned in significant capacities in each state, but the way that the capacity in which they're listed is slightly different for each state. And then also thinking about what implementation activities can you and your partners lead or support, ranging from hotspot lending to digital literacy classes. And then lastly, has the state set any key performance indicators for digital inclusion that you should be aware of? So I'm going to pass it over to Catalina now to talk about the third and final grant.
Thank you. So, so the capacity grants continue to be an opportunity, but another opportunity that is open right now for you is the capacity grant. And so the purpose of the capacity grant, as you can see on the screen, is to support the efforts to achieve digital equity, promote digital inclusion activities, and spur greater adoption of broadband among covered populations. As a reminder, there are some key differences between the competitive grant and the other two digital equity grant programs that Shirley just described. The first is that the competitive grant is open to both eligible state and non-state entities. And then the second is that the funding for the competitive grant will be, as the name implies, a competitive funding instead of formula funding. And the funding for this grant will last 4 years. So we're kind of waiting what happens with the capacity grants, and we are kind of waiting now for the notice of funding opportunity to come out sometime between the summer and September. So we are not sure what's going to happen or exactly when. That being said, by law, the NOFO must come out within 30 days of the first state receiving their capacity grant funding. And so, so if the first state to receive the funding gets it in April 1st, let's say, which is very soon, so maybe not so soon, but who knows, then the NOFO for the competitive grant must be released by April 30th of 2024. So everybody, as I said earlier, is kind of waiting for the NOFO to drop. So on this slide, you'll see the list of entities who are eligible to apply for the competitive grant. To point out here a few: state adult education offices, nonprofits, community anchor institutions. As Shirley said yesterday, this includes libraries, local education agencies, and others will be eligible to apply. Partnerships between any of the above also qualify to apply. And partnerships here is important because on the speculative side of things, we think, and we are hearing rumors, that NTIA is likely to award large multi-million awards to national, statewide, and regional collaboration efforts versus funding multiple initiatives for small amounts of money. So if this is the case, then the backbone organization could receive the award and then distribute the funding to other partners, including smaller organizations who need more capacity and support. So this opens again another opportunity for all of us to think about those digital equity ecosystems and how libraries can position themselves to be an agent of bringing other groups together and bringing those digital equity ecosystems to work. So again, this is all speculation. We need to wait. That being said, partnerships are important, coalitions are important, so please continue to your efforts in that regard. And something else to note is that the office that is leading the digital equity plan implementation in your state, which is likely a state broadband office, is not eligible to apply for the competitive grant. So what activities are allowable under the competitive grant? So broadly defined, all digital inclusion activities for covered populations are allowable. The legislation also cites some specific examples, including activities that help people adopt broadband for education and employment opportunities, digital literacy, digital skills training at all levels, equipment to provide low or no cost broadband access, and public computing centers. NTIA can also approve other projects and activities as they see fit. So we are still, as I said earlier, just waiting for the NOFO to drop. So what can you do right now? So at the Net Inclusion Conference in Philadelphia earlier this month, we heard from Angela T. Bennett, the NTIA's Digital Equity Director, and to share some of the recommendations that you see on the slide. And so, build your partnerships and collaborate strategically, as I was saying earlier, identify partner roles and responsibilities for effective collective action, identify how you can help your state achieve its goals. Shirley mentioned earlier, read your state digital equity plan, make sure that you know where you fit and what role can you take, understand your community needs, and most importantly, she said, don't wait. We will also provide a link to this webinar or this clip so you can find more information there. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so I think, do I pass it now to you, Shirley?
Yep, and the link to the net inclusion stream is already in the chat, so start it at
Thank you.
4:12:30 for Angela's remarks. So in terms of further resources, if you're interested in learning more, especially about the competitive grant, we highly recommend checking out the Digital Equity Champions for All Learners webinar workshop series. I'm just going to take a second to click enter here. This is a series that we just held in collaboration with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Educational Technology and the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, or COABE. So all of the resources and webinar recordings are up on this page, and the recording for the recent workshop should be up within a few weeks as well. This series is focused on preparing the adult education field for the competitive grant, but much of the information, because it's so generalized at this point, is applicable towards libraries as well. And a lot of the content is focused on very interesting digital inclusion models, including digital literacy or multilingual resources. So lots of content there to check out. And we'll continue updating that as time goes on.
And
so that was our very condensed version of what the Digital Equity Act is. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or email us afterwards. Our information is on the slides.
Thank you so much, Catalina and Shirley. Thank you for, putting that together. I know I asked you to do that quickly, so thanks very much. We will share, Shirley has already shared the slides with us, so we will share those in our Connect space as well as all of the links. You'll have those. If you do have questions though, feel free to put those in the chat. And then we will hopefully have some time for Q&A at the end, but we're going to go ahead and turn it to Marika next.
Thanks, Megan. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so I'm excited to share what's going on in Maine. And I will share one link in case people are interested, but Maine's plan, I guess, is on their webpage now too, if you want to dig into what Maine is. So when I was thinking about this, for another project, I had been doing a little bit of digging about how ALA and libraries in general have been talking about digital equity and digital literacy and digital skills training. And then when I came, I realized that there are a handful of people on this call today who have been active in this space way back when digital inclusion and digital inequity were just kind of nascent phrases. So it's kind of interesting to me. What that says is something I was thinking about sharing anyway, is that this is a space that libraries really own, in my opinion. And I know I'm a little biased because I care about libraries, but I think it really is a time for libraries to shine. And libraries have been doing this work in various formats for as long as it's really been a topic. So I think that that's one thing in our favor, and something that libraries at all levels, all types of libraries, can really step up and talk about with whoever in your state is responsible for implementing the plans. But so I'm at the Maine State Library, as Megan said, and my perspective is very much from a rural state, and thinking about the role that state libraries have in ensuring, to the extent that we're able to, but ensuring that local libraries are participating at some level. So I thought I would talk a little bit about how Maine approached it, and then kind of where we are right now and what we at the State Library are trying to do. oh, sorry, my screen just did something strange. Again, focusing on the rural nature of Maine, and our small and rural libraries, and how it's a little bit different from that perspective than maybe a larger library system or regional systems. So in Maine, the governor stood up a quasi-governmental organization to receive all of the ARPA funding and the different broadband funding opportunities that came out of the legislation. So that includes the BEAD, which is focused on broadband build out. It includes the funding from the US Treasury, the Capital Projects Fund, and then it includes Digital Equity Act funding. And so at the time, I wasn't so sure about merging all of those together because I thought it might muddy the waters. One thing that I really liked about the Digital Equity Act is that it called attention to digital equity. And that is something really, it relates to broadband, but as far as libraries are concerned, it really opens a lot of doors differently than broadband specific funding. So I was really hoping that they would kind of separate that out. But nonetheless, in the end, I think it was a smart thing that they did. So our plans, our BEAD plan really speaks to our digital equity plan. And the thing that I like about that is that actually, I hadn't thought about it at the beginning, but it raises the profile of digital skills training and access to the devices in a way that maybe it wouldn't have if it had been separated. It might have still been the stepchild, so to speak, in the broadband space. Because in Maine, there's still so much challenge about actually getting broadband out to the rural areas and affordable broadband especially. So anyway, all of our funding is merged under the Maine Connectivity Authority is what it's called. And they are the ones who submitted our plan. We were actually had ours approved first, which everyone in Maine is very excited about. And so where we are now is in that holding pattern. But what we had done was, and I'm sorry, I should have said this in the beginning, is before the Connectivity Authority was established, I had reached out to the governor's office to find out what was going on, knowing that the money was going to be coming into the state. So kind of proactively, I wanted to know how it was going to be, like what the early thoughts were, how people were thinking about it from the beginning, so that, early and often they would hear the word libraries and start to think about how libraries could be good partners at the local level. So anyway, when the Connectivity Authority was established, I just kind of raised my hand and said, there's 255 public libraries sprinkled throughout the state. And in Maine, we're also very fortunate because we have the Maine School and Library Network, which oversees the internet access for schools in most of the public libraries, all but I forget, 15 or something like that are on the network. And what that means is, except for our island libraries, every library has a gigabit of internet connectivity up and down. And that's, I still think, fairly unique for a rural state. So we have that to offer. We have space to offer. And I'm going to say we have staff to offer. I'll come back to that because that's also a challenge for us here in our rural and small libraries. But almost all libraries have those things to bring to the table, which is really important in the digital equity space. The internet access, devices, a space, and staffing. Now, what you do with it can all vary, but having those things is all part of the mix. So we were engaged with the development of the plan from the beginning, and I actually did a Control F for Libra, and libraries in some form are mentioned 72 times in there in our plan, which you might want to do that just out of for something fun to do with your plan, just to see again where and how libraries are mentioned, and as they said earlier, in what capacity, right? And So the way that we are really mentioned is as that local partner on the ground. And another way that we've focused our plan is regionally. So we have 9 regional, they call them regional broadband partners, regional and tribal broadband partners, I should say. And so the kind of the umbrella work is happening at the state level with statewide partners. And then we're funneling that information to the regions, and the regional partners are then doing their own work. It's going to look different depending on what's going on in the regions. Like some regions have more of a priority on older adults, and another region may have a priority on a different covered population. But all together, they're answering what the goals are of Maine's plan. And then they're also funneling back up to the state level different gaps in areas where they need extra support, whatever it may be. So the work that we're doing right now is to try and connect those regional partners with the libraries in their regions. And at the same time, I've been doing a lot of work to make sure our libraries are really kind of ready, just in case there's outreach happening, because we're encouraging the outreach to happen, so that they'll be prepared to say, yes, I would love to be a partner. Because I also think, as was noted earlier, that Maine will be sharing the funding out to these regions. We want to make sure that libraries are receiving that funding, because while libraries have those things I mentioned, the space, the devices, the internet, and the staffing, there are gaps, especially because most of our libraries are small and rural libraries. It's about 70% of our libraries serve communities of 5,000 or fewer, and about half are 2,500. And then we also, it's just under half of our libraries are staffed by 1 or 2 people. So when you think about the possibility of providing digital skills training, or I'll come back to the questions in the chat, but digital skills training, or people coming in for whatever help, how people all come into your libraries and asking for whatever kind of support. When you have 1 or 2 staff, or open fewer hours, then you think about what the actual capacity of the library is to provide what is being asked of them. So our job has also been to remind the Connectivity Authority that while libraries are here and willing and ready to partner, they're going to need some support to be successful in doing that. So we do have an ask. We're not just offering up the library, right? We want libraries to either receive funding. We've been talking a lot about digital navigators. So if you have 1 or 2 staff, and we actually have 7 libraries that are run entirely by volunteers. So anyway, if you have just a couple of staff, it helps to have a body, to have a person who can deliver these services. So we've been talking a lot about digital navigators and looking to partners to be able to provide those kinds of services. I may have touched on all of my major points. I really was hoping to, because I'm always curious what is happening in other states, whether people would have questions that would also help some of the direction that we're taking. I'd be happy to talk more about what we've been doing specifically for small and rural libraries, in case any of you are actually small rural libraries, and how we've been trying to have our libraries be able to talk to their regional partners. Before I stop, I did want to just call out again what I said in the beginning, is that this is really our opportunity, libraries' opportunities. Again, for this other project that I was working on, I looked back at some work that ALA had done after the National Broadband Plan came out in 2010. And at that time, ALA put together a digital literacy task force, of which Pat Ball was on it and Gwen Weaver was involved. And I know we contacted Marion right and left all the time for examples of what was going on in the libraries. But the definition that the task force came up with is the definition that's in the Digital Equity Act. Right. So that, to me, that's just another example of like libraries really carved out this place. So it's an opportunity to step right in that door that has been opened. So. I can answer the questions, Megan, unless you want to do it differently.
No, yeah, it looks like Arlene has a question. That would be great.
Right. So it's interesting about the regional structure. The Connectivity Authority worked with a researcher who looked at some of the targets or not targets. Well, the focus of the Digital Equity Act in terms of the covered populations, and then where gaps were in the state, and kind of folded those together a little bit, or at least tried to align them. And that's how the regions were developed. So they're not existing regions at all. And it's also interesting, we divide the state into 9 regions, which are not exactly the same as these regions as far as libraries go. And so we're trying to align our libraries again with those regions. There's a little bit of overlap, but not quite one for one. And was there another one? Maybe not.
I think the others was just a comment. So Christy said that she also
the
uses
Control F.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. Just because then you can see also like how other people are talking about libraries and figure out how that aligns or doesn't align with how you think about how you would be offering services or the services you would be able to offer, I think.
Marika,
Chris,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I have a question, Marika. This is James from IMLS. How are
Yep.
you?
Good.
Good. We have had an ongoing conversation for several years, Marika and I, about small and rural libraries lacking capacity to apply for federal funding. And, this is I think the 4th time I've attended one of the virtual meetings for this library working group, had a chance to meet with the group that met at Net Inclusion in Philadelphia. And one of the things that I've been hoping is that this peer-to-peer experience, the support of one another from libraries to librarians and librarians to libraries will give us an opportunity to support one another. But could you speak to what you would envision would be not ideal, but a better way of how we support one another, especially small and rural libraries? Thank you.
Right. You mean how the federal government might support small and rural libraries, or this group?
Actually, this group
This
and
group,
in general.
okay. Yeah.
I kind of know about the federal government's role and what can and cannot be done. So
I know. I could tell you what I wish could be done.
Well, let's continue to talk publicly here.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. And that's one reason why I think the state library has such a big role. Again, speaking for the small and rural libraries. And I have been talking with COSLA, or, the chiefs, about what they can do. I feel really strongly that having somebody kind of be an intermediary between what's happening at the federal level, at that big bucket level, and on the ground is really important. In states that have regional systems, so Maine, all our libraries are standalone libraries. We have 3 that have a branch. So that makes a big difference. So for states that have regional systems or larger systems, I think it's a little bit different. They're also, the capacity is maybe bunched together a little bit. So I would say the state library has a big role to play there. I love the idea of this group also sharing best practice. so that you can say, you know, this is what worked when, like during COVID is a great example. All that you were doing during COVID to connect with people who normally walked through your doors, right? They couldn't walk through your doors, and then they were doing all this other stuff they were required to do online. So sharing those kinds of experiences, I think is really important. And I know, I mean, we've been with COVID for what, 4 years, I guess. And I wouldn't say it's getting old to talk about it yet, but you know, the silver lining is that people cannot deny how important this is now. So again, like chip away at what you did, because it's all valid, and all those things that you learned about how to shift your services virtually can be used now, I think. So sharing that experience, I think, is really important. And then like thinking about you know, what happens in each state is going to be relevant in each state. But nonetheless, there's going to be similarities. So the way that libraries do outreach to the covered populations, I think sharing that kind of information, right? Because like here in Maine, we're not so great at connecting with people who don't have English as a first language. So I think it behooves us to learn from states and libraries that do have experiences connecting with people who speak a language other than English, right? So I think that those kinds of things may help. So off the top of my head, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it's perfect, actually. Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
And Chris, did you have a question? Chris
Well,
Gobro?
I just wanted to say, yes, thanks. I wanted to say that Marika's description of how they're trying to deal with this regional setup is very important to us. In Connecticut, the regional educational service centers were chosen as the hubs for the discussion of gaps, the distribution of all grant monies to any anchor institutions, etc. And many libraries have no real relationship with this organization. Historically, it's primarily a K through 12 organization, though with some connections to workforce development and a few other specific service entities. And our group, our coalition group, or our networking group of libraries and partners just had a discussion about what they think they need. And the thing they say they need the most is figuring out how to make themselves visible in this new structures, and how to function in these new structures. So I think anything that we learn, like anything that any little models or examples, stories even, that we can share about libraries working with these brand new, pretty much brand new, or at least unfamiliar regional structures is really important. And that'll be a real contribution to us functioning well in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the Connectivity Authority, it's MCA. I keep wanting to say MCA. So just so you know, if I say MCA, that's the body that is taking or receiving the funds and implementing the plan. So they have focused quite a bit on communications and outreach, actually. So like the hype, like talking it up, and have really, I think, done a pretty good job in a dispersed state. But having the state library also be a place for these regional partners to call or email, whatever, and ask about, how do I connect with my local libraries? You know, you know, that kind of thing. That's been something we've done. We've fielded a lot of calls in that way. And so, you know, sharing out my contact information and saying, the library may not get back to you, but it's because they're only open for 12 hours. So, you know, call me and we can negotiate that. But yeah, because it is brand new. Some of these partners really don't think about their libraries in this way. So we are really talking up all the things that they do right now. But yeah, I'd be happy to stay in touch or whatever, share how things are going.
Anybody else? Questions for Marika or for World Ed, or just thoughts? How are you thinking about the Digital Equity Act, the competitive grant, the capacity grants, the state plans? We definitely want to continue this conversation over the next several months. This is, this is a huge thing. And as Marika said, really important for libraries. So
I don't want to take up all the space, but I do have another question related to the comment that I put in the chat about this role of subgrantees. I'm curious for folks that have looked at other state plans, is there anything in other states where some of those ideas have already been worked out in terms of who the state entity that's administering the fund would actually work with to do subgrants? Because I know that level of detail has just not been part of the discussions that we've had around our digital equity plan here in Oregon. I'm sorry, I'm in Oregon. And I'm worried that unless, will we have to yet again position ourselves once our plan is actually in place, because our plan doesn't have that kind of detail in it. So I'm curious if folks in other states have seen more specifics about the particular partners that the state entity plans to work with when it comes to particularly around distributing the money.
So I can speak for some of the plans that we have seen. It comes to mind right now, Colorado and Virginia. They talk about creating subgrants, but it's not specific to the libraries as the central partner. So again, if there is a conversation about we are going to provide subgrants and you read your plan and libraries are likely mentioned already as an asset, think about how you can position yourself better in that state to get those grants. But yeah, when there is nothing in the plan, it's very difficult to know exactly how they are going to be using the funds. And that is something that we have seen across other states as well. There is not enough clarity about how they are going to be implementing the plan. So it's very loose in that sense. And so in that case, advocacy continues to be a critical effort that we all need to be involved in to make sure that the funds actually go to the communities that we are advocating for and working with.
yeah, Gwen, I see
Can
you
I
here.
can I just jump in? This is one of my favorite topics and my passion anyway. But I do want to suggest, and Lo, you may have something to say about this too, that libraries everywhere, wherever there is also a group of people who are doing digital equity in a collaborative way, or if there's any kind of organization locally or in your state that's working on it, I think connecting with those organizations also makes a huge difference, because in some cases, well, in a lot of cases, I think there are people doing a lot of digital equity work that just don't think about working with libraries because they're so focused on what they're doing, and they're doing good work, but they don't realize that there's additional horsepower and especially additional experience, because what Marika said is true. Libraries have been doing this work long before the label digital equity came out. And, other entities, I think, are missing the boat. And I think libraries may be missing some opportunities to connect, so finding opportunities to collaborate or partner, I think, is really, really critical for libraries at this time, particularly. And I will shut up because I can ramble for days. Thank you, Lo.
Well, I'll add on to what Gwen said is that, some of the state digital equity plans should also include mention of plans that they use to actually create the state's plan. So many of the state digital equity plans are also wrapping up the community at the assets and the plans that were created at the local level. So you may want to look in your state digital equity plan or opportunity plan, whatever they called it, and see who else that they're mentioning and where else they got their data, to see if there's somebody more closely aligned to where you are, to see maybe that's a connection you want to start reaching out to see, if you don't know what the coalition is in your area, or if there's one that might be close to you, but you're not part of, this is how you can start seeing who the state already has been starting to make inroads to. It's not the only people, but these are people that have already been in regular communication with the state. And I will also say, I'm curious, and this is purely speculation on my part, but I'm wondering if some of the states are being somewhat vague. Although I will say I've read state plans about the funding where they're saying that they're hoping to do both grants as well as a grant process, as well as, giving direct money. But again, 50 plans, 50 different ideas, actually 52 plans, 52 different ideas, because that's some of the territories. I think we also, should keep a close eye on when the state, I always get this wrong, the state capacity grant, NOFO, the notice of funding opportunity, comes out. And I think that will also provide us some real good guidance as to how states start thinking about how they're going to give out funds within the state process. And so the NOFO, the NOFO is a notice of funding opportunity. And so as I can't remember if it was Shirley or Catalina that said this when they were giving their talk, but there was money that was given to the states to do the digital equity plan, and then the next step is the capacity grant. And the rules aren't out for that yet. States are going to have to apply, and I think that's where we're going to start to get more clarity around how states are going to start thinking about how they're going to give out money internally through their systems. So I think it's kind of a wait and see approach, in my opinion.
We've got just a couple minutes left. Any other thoughts or questions? So as you probably heard, this is definitely a to be continued conversation. There's a lot of moving pieces and a lot that's happening probably really soon. So keep your eye on the Connect space. We will definitely be posting updates there. Keep in touch with us, keep in touch with this group, so we can work together, think through some different things. I hope today's meeting was helpful in thinking about the Digital Equity Act. If you have any feedback, please reach out to me. If you would like to be a featured speaker in an upcoming month, or if you have a certain topic that you would like us to focus on in an upcoming month, let Emily and me know. We would love to hear from you if you're doing something really cool related to digital inclusion in your library. We'd love to talk about it in this group. So reach out to me if you want to do a presentation or a facilitated discussion. And I think that's probably it. Thanks so much for being here. I think we'll leave the line open for a couple of minutes in case anyone wants to hang back and chat. But otherwise, great to see everyone and hope to see you next month.